So today I'm going to be talking about the Cali Audio IN-8 second wave, which is a second version of this amazing speaker. I'm going to kind of go through my thoughts on it today and tell you what I think about it. And ultimately, is this the right decision for your studio? That's what we're going to get into today. Now, before we get started, I think I need to have a precursor to discussing this. And that is, unfortunately, a lot of people make the mistake of assessing speakers like this in this price range and lower in untreated rooms and passing judgment in that situation. I need you to all understand that is not a fair assessment. That's not the way any of this works, which is why it's so important to treat your room before you go invest in, nicer speakers for your studio. Your room treatment is the most important aspect of that. Now, if you can't treat your room, I recently did a review of the ARC system from IK Multimedia that does a very good job. And I will tell you, when I use these speakers with the ARC, I use these speakers to test the ARC because I wanted to compare them to my Atom Audio speakers there in the back, which are the most recent version of those. And I wanted to be able to get a feel for it. So I kind of went back and forth between the same mix after I got everything worked out to see where they landed. Now, a common mistake that a lot of guys at home make when assessing a set of speakers like this, when you get into this price range and even lower, ultimately they will cast their assessment based upon what it sounds like in their studio. And you would say, well, yeah, how else are they going to do it? Well, it depends. It depends. If that room is not treated, you are not evaluating the speakers properly. And it's important that you understand that. If you have no room treatment or no other way of getting your room properly tuned, whether that is with room treatment or using something like the ARC system, which I reviewed here recently, that actually does a very good job for what it does to compensate for rooms that may not be properly treated. But understand, I'll see comments about a particular set of speakers that I've listened and I've auditioned and think are really great. And other people will chime in and say, well, no, it was too woofy on the bottom end, or the high end was too shrill. And I'm like, no, they're not. No, it wasn't. Not unless you got a bad pair or something. And the odds of that are probably pretty slim. That's probably not the case. It's probably because your room's not properly treated. So keep that in mind. Treat your room, then invest in upgrading your monitors. That's always my personal advice. So here we've got an 8-inch woofer, and then we've got the tweeter up here, and we've got a bass relief port down here. All fairly standard stuff. So what is kind of separating this particular monitor from maybe its competition? I'm going to tell you, it's whatever the innards are inside here, because they've done something really good. I was really impressed with the LP6s. I believe it was the 6s or the 7s that I reviewed before. And I was very impressed, and they were a lesser expensive monitor than this. These, compared to my Atom Audio, which are double the cost of these, ultimately do a very good job of holding their own. Are they as good as my Atom Audio? Well, of course not. I mean, something's twice as expensive. It's not always the case. We all know that in the audio world. But in this situation, it is. There's just continued refinement that happens in a speaker system that costs as much as the Atom Audio. But I'm going to tell you, they've gotten incredibly, incredibly close with this particular monitor. One of the things I found really cool and unique about it was another common feature that it shares with the A77Hs, and that is it has built-in DSP. So now you've got built-in DSP that can compensate for room issues that you may have or particular mix preferences you may have. Let's turn this around and let's talk about how that's done. On the back here, you have various dip switches that can all be changed. And what this is, it is digitally controlling that signal. So these are not a pure analog speaker. However, none of that affects the tone of these. Neither does it on my Atom Audio. Again, twice as expensive. But it gives you various examples back here on placement, depending on where you're placing them. How far off the wall are you? A lot of people make the mistakes and get their speakers right back up against the wall. Big mistake. Don't do that. Leave yourself a gap. Yes, even if it shrinks your studio, you want to do that. And then it also goes to the various dip switches. Now, the only thing that the Atom Audio has in this regard that these don't have, and it would be a nice touch, but then again, twice as expensive, is the fact that there's an Ethernet port on the back of the Atom Audio that allows me to go in and tweak that all within the computer. So if I want to change that throughout the process, I can do that quite easily. Whereas this, I've got to crawl under the desk, get up behind the desk, flip some dip switches, and then crawl back and listening over and over and over. That can be a pain in the butt in this studio. You may not have that problem. Okay. Of course, it's got various input selectors here. You've got a TRS balanced, you've got RCA here, and then you've got XLR, and of course, you've got your output. Now, it is worth noting that these are twice in volume their predecessor. The overall volume of these is double that, give or take. I may be off a little bit, but give or take is double that. And let me get that angle right for you. And so there's no shortage of volume with these. I mean, these things are loud as you're going to want them most likely. And I never recommend mixing loud. I like to mix at the volume where you can hear me talk while I'm mixing, and I recommend you do that if you're not. Nothing wrong with cranking that fader up when you want to jam to it, but if you're mixing, I strongly suggest you lower that volume. All right, so anyway, how is the bass response on these? I think a lot of people really, the first question is, you got to break it down. What's the bass response like? How does the mid-range feel on this? And then how are the upper highs, okay? And how does that sound? So the terminology we typically associate with low end is it thumps. It gives you that thump in the chest, or it can sound woofy and woolly. It can often sound too cluttered, trying to jam in too many frequencies down there. But it can be solid. It can be tight. It can be all things depending on the design of the speaker. How I would define these is I would find these are low end rich. There's no shortage of low end on these. But here's the thing, and I was really surprised in this price range because it goes to show how far we have come in these years of monitor development and speaker development. You would think that that's all already been mastered by now but that's not the case. They continue to make great advancements. So the low end of this is very nice. It's tight, it's thumping. There's no woolliness or whisk to these that I could discern, none whatsoever in this room. Now I will note that when I first tested these, I tested these in an untreated room when I did that ARC video. And ultimately, once I got the ARC set up and I was in that room, by darn it, it did it. That ARC actually compensated for my room, and it transitioned the tonality of these speakers tremendously. Well, I won't say tremendously, but it definitely compensated for it, mainly because of the room acoustics or lack thereof, which again goes to show why it's important to assess speakers in a properly treated space. All right. So ultimately, I love the low end on these speakers for the price range. I was blown away at how loud and how much low end they have. Now, if you're in a small room, okay, an 8-inch is likely to be too much for you. So consider that stepping down to a smaller woofer size. People, you cannot associate the way you view monitors for your mixing environment the same as you would for monitors in your listening environment, whether that's your stereo or whatever you want to do. They serve two different purposes. Always keep that in mind. So ultimately, the low end is very good on these. It sounds absolutely fantastic, but don't get too much low end in your studio. It'll be a problem for you. All right. So that you can get that with this in a small room. If you're in a more of a typical regular size room, it'll open up and work a lot better for you. All right. So ultimately, we get into the tweeter. How does a tweeter sound? And then I'll finish up with the mid range. The tweeter, the high end, a lot of common problems that I've noticed. More value oriented speakers. Now these are going into the value plus. These aren't quite as a value as their earlier models that were much lesser expensive. But still, these are still moderately priced in the big scheme of things as it relates to studio monitors. But typically, a lot of the things I would notice in lesser priced speakers is the high end could be harsh. It could be a little shrill. There could be a lot of hiss. Now, this particular version kind of suffered from a little bit too much high end hiss on V1 of this, or first wave. But the second wave, that's all been dealt with. The headroom of these speakers is absolutely fantastic. The tonal balance is fantastic. The high ends are smooth and responsive. There's a lot of clarity and detail. Now, again, I'll compare them because it's always important to understand Your investment oftentimes will dictate the degree of what you're going to get. Now, to some degree, I'm going to start splitting some hairs here, so understand that. Don't make any one particular point I make throughout this seem like it's a big deal. If it is, I'll tell you, okay? But the high end on these is not as smooth and responsive as it is on my Atom speakers, okay? Again, you wouldn't expect that. For these, absolutely fantastic. Could I mix any particular song of any genre on these speakers and feel confident about it? You better believe it. You know why? Because that oh so magical mid-range sounds so awesome on these speakers. The balance between the low end, the mid-range, and the high end is absolutely phenomenal. The earlier Kali monitors that I reviewed, it was good for that price range, although I wasn't overly critical of it in that particular review because I don't think that was fair in that price range. But in this one, that opens up the discussion a lot more. What they've done with the second version, the second wave of these speakers, has proven to be quite beneficial and worthy of the upgrade if you own the previous versions. Definitely worthy of the upgrade. Kali Audio has got something going on. They've got something special in the tank. I don't know what it is, but whatever they're doing, it's good and I want more of it. Are these speakers right for everybody? No. If I was honestly in a mastering situation, these are not my first go-to because those little nuanced differences is what really makes a difference in a nicer set of monitors. So I would be cautious about doing that. If I was doing a lot of primarily acoustic music, where just picture an acoustic guitar, a fiddle, a mandolin, an upright bass, something along that lines or something, these will do a good job, but they're not going to do best at that. Again, that's where a higher end monitor is really going to show its value. On everything else, which is 98% of all the music out there, these are rock solid and should be on your list of consideration when you upgrade your monitors or buy your monitors for the first time. These are definitely worthy of it. Now, a lot of you are going to say, well, Barry, how do these compare to this model, and that model? And ultimately, I'm not going to go down that road, and here's why. And I think a lot of people, unless they have those monitors in their studio and are very familiar with them when they evaluate these, you really can't tell, because I'd love to tell you that I remember exactly when I'm testing other monitors out, exactly how well they perform to give a true and accurate representation of the comparison to these or any other monitor. I'm sorry, that's just not realistic. If you can do it, more power to you, but I'm not going to be that guy. So ultimately, all I can tell you is these are an incredible bang for the buck. I think you'd be hard pressed to find a higher quality speaker in this price range in a properly treated room, okay? Can't drive that message home enough, all right? But these are solid monitors that I would certainly be proud to use in my studio if I didn't have those Atom Audios. But I do, and I'm going to keep them because they are better. These are great. Those are better. These are half the price of those. There you go. Go figure. If I was going out and buying all over again, would I pay double the price for the Atom over this? Would I? I'm going to tell you, I would think long and hard about it. I ultimately probably would end up doing it, but I would think long and hard about it. So do me a favor, if you do plan on buying these or any other set of monitors or anything where you're going to buy a pick, guitar strings, I don't care what it is, a mic cable, I don't care. Ultimately, if you want to support this channel, I have an affiliation with Sweetwater where I'm part of their affiliate program, where anything that you buy from them using the link provided in the description below to this, if you just copy that link over into your browser, whatever you put in your cart, ultimately, I will get a tiny percentage of that. Full disclosure, that's the way it works. You don't make much money off views. So if I'm going to continue doing this, it's a way of monetizing my channel in a way that makes it worthy of my time and effort to put into this, which I truly enjoy doing, but I want to be compensated for it. Now, do me a favor, leave me some comments down below. Tell me what you think. Are there any topics I didn't particularly touch on when it comes to this speaker? Anything you'd like me to really kind of provide more insight onto? Try to put that down below. I'll do my very best to answer those questions. But do me a favor, until next time, I hope every one of you have a great day making some music, because that's what it's all about for us. Bye-bye.